In this video, I'm going to show you how to make this simple and clever sword illusion costume really quickly. And the main tool I use to make this costume is a 3D printing pen. I know that whipping up a cool costume fast can be difficult. That's why I want to show you the power of using a 3D pen to make some great costumes without sinking in hours and hours of work. I was able to make the full version of this costume with the sword in the front and the back in about 35 minutes. You could, of course, just make the front half even quicker. This do-it-yourself costume tutorial goes along with my main fabric and 3D pen video, in which I show 5 other clever uses of a 3D pen for costumes or cosplay. These are some clips from that video, which I've linked at the end of this one, so be sure to check it out for more ideas. To prove to you that I made this costume in the time I'm claiming, I'm going to show you a hyperlapse which condenses the whole build into about 90 seconds. This timer will be visible, and the hyperlapse should give you a nice overview of the construction process. After the hyperlapse, I'll take you step by step through all the details so you can make your own version. Finally, I'll end with some tips and tricks on how to improve the basic design with a little bit more build time. But first, on to the hyperlapse. So as this timed version is playing, I'm going to describe the basics of how the costume works. I also want to say that with what I'm showing here, I just want to show that the costume can be built very quickly. You can, of course, make it a bunch of different ways and with a lot of improvements, some of which I talk about at the end of this video. The secret ingredient to this costume, and the basic way that it works, is using magnets. We take a plastic sword, cut it in half, and then use a 3D pen to put a magnet in each half. Creating a custom holder for each magnet and then bonding it in is what's being shown here. Then we take a cloth belt and mark it in the appropriate locations. Then we make mating magnet holders, which will be attached to the cloth belt that we just saw. And remember, for the full version of the costume, where the sword is in the front and the back, we have to use 4 magnets and make 4 different holders. As I mentioned earlier, you could make this costume even quicker if you only make the front half, which I think still looks great. Now I'm preparing the belt to attach the magnet and magnet holders that will be hidden under a shirt. After these magnet holders are attached to the belt, the costume is done. Even though the build time comes in at under 35 minutes, we're going to round up just to be conservative. Here's a look at the completed costume and showing it in action without a shirt covering up the belt. Now that I've shown you the proof, let's talk about what you will need to pull this costume off. The total cost for what you see here was about $22 US, and all of it is available on Amazon. You're going to need a plastic sword, an adjustable fabric belt, the coarser the better, and 4 10mm diameter by 10mm long magnets. Of course, you also need a 3D pen and some filament to complete this build. A 3D pen has so many varied uses beyond making just this costume. It's a great investment, and I hope you take the plunge if you haven't already. I've also included a full list of the tools I use in the video description, so check there for that information. A very quick word about safety. Some of the techniques and tools I show in this video can be dangerous. Please use the appropriate safety gear and caution when trying anything shown in this video. So starting at the beginning, this is a look at the unaltered plastic sword that I'm using in this costume. In terms of cutting the sword, you have a number of options. You can use anything from a Dremel to a wood burning tool with a hot knife attachment, or even a common hacksaw. So be sure to plan where you're making the cut so that you have the amount of hilt sticking out that you want. And you can also trim some off of the blade portion if you don't want as much sticking out of your back. If you do use a Dremel like I did, you're going to need to use a file to remove some of the blobs of plastic where you made the cut. This is so that you can use the 3D pen to make some nice magnet holders that fit snugly into both sides of the sword. Once you have both sides of the sword cleaned up, we're going to trace the outlines of each half to use as a stencil for the 3D pen. A magnet will be placed in the center of this outline, and we'll use a 3D pen to create a plastic holder around it. An important note about the magnets, you should mark both sides with different colors so that you can tell the polarities apart. Now we're going to walk through creating the plastic holders on the sword side, which I've made in red for certain reasons. I start by placing the magnet in the middle and then making a single circular layer around it. Once that's done, I draw the outer profile and then begin filling it in. After the profile is fully filled in comes maybe the trickiest part about this build. We have to make a little cup to hold the magnet, and getting this started can require a little finessing with your finger. And I ended up filling in one half of the cup and then rotating in doing the other side. This is what the completed magnet holder for the hilt side of the sword looks like. Before doing final attachment, we can check the fit in the hilt. Don't worry if there are gaps, we can fill that in easily with the 3D pen. Another nice thing about this illusion is that by using red here, we don't have to be super careful about making the lines clean and precise. In fact, if you make it look a little bit messy, it may even help the illusion because, well, you know. The magnet holder for the other half of the sword is done exactly the same, so I'm not going to show that whole process again. We'll move on to talking about the belt and that whole setup now. You can of course use any fabric belt, but the 3D pen filament will stick much better to a coarser version like this one. The first thing we have to do with the belt is to mark the locations on the front and back where we want the swords to magnetically attach. The distance between the two pieces of tape is about 45 to 50 millimeters, but this is pretty arbitrary. We just need enough room for the magnet and to make sure the attachment is strong enough. Once these are marked off, we can create two stencils to pen over like we did for the red profiles. I made the magnet holders for the belt in black so that they blend in well, and the general idea for creating them is exactly the same as the red ones that we just made. Just don't forget to make the magnet polarity opposite here, like somebody did. I am, however, going to show this tricky part again to give you another take of me making it. And this is the finished version of one of the belt magnet holders. To attach these black magnet holders to the belt, we need to make some connection points on the belt itself. I do that by making 3 separate bars within the taped area. I also want to say that I have been using rigid PLA for everything shown so far in the video. The reason I do that is to make the magnetic connection work. If you use flexible filament, everything sags way too much. For the final connection, I simply pinch at the center and then use the pen to connect the bar to the magnet holder, like you see here. You can also use a pencil or a piece of cardboard to prevent sag here if you like. Also note that I was going for speed here, so you can thicken these up a lot to make them much stronger. And that's it, your costume is now complete. A quick tip about getting the magnets apart. If you slide them apart as opposed to pulling them apart, it puts a lot less force on the 3D pen magnet holders that you've made. Now we just need to cover up that belt. Any shirt will do if it's not too thick. If you try to cover it with something too thick, the magnet connection won't work. Now that I've shown you the basic version of this costume, which I made in about 35 minutes, I'm going to suggest some tips which can be used to make the costume more robust, even though it will add a little bit of build time. The first tip is concerning the magnets themselves. In the basic version, I don't use anything to really retain the magnets, and after taking the sword ends on and off a bunch of times, they can come loose. Here I'm using some 2-part epoxy, JB Quick, to bond the magnets in place and make sure they don't come loose. Next tip. Remember how I mentioned everything I had done was in rigid PLA? Well, these bars on the belt don't hold very well. Shocker. So what you can do is you can take some flexible filament and pen right over them to help hold them in place. I guess I should have used a different color to highlight the difference, but the single strip across the center is flexible filament. The final tip is about the sag that you can see with the rear part of the costume. When the tip of the sword droops too much, the illusion doesn't look quite as good. I came up with 2 ways to help fix this. The first is to angle the magnet holder in the front so that the hilt matches the sag of the sword in the rear a bit more. Here it is in place, showing how it will angle the hilt upward. The second fix is to extend the magnet holder in the back like you see here, which will help fight the droop of the sword. This improvement does take a little bit longer to make, but it will help push your costume over the top. Note that these two sidewalls that I add here really help to stiffen and strengthen everything and are essential to make this work. This is what my finished rear stiffener looks like. Here it is in place, showing the orientation you should put it in. I hope you like this quick and creative costume and are able to make one for yourself. If you do make one, I'd love to see it. Head over to Twitter and tweet me a picture of your costume. I'm @PotentPrintable. There's also a link to my Twitter account in the video description. I'm really excited about how well a 3D pen is working with costumes, cosplay, and fabric in general. Let me know in the comments if you have any ideas or suggestions for costumes you'd like me to tackle in the future. As I mentioned earlier, here's a link to my main video about fabric and 3D pens. Or if you're interested in learning how to use a 3D pen, check out this tutorials playlist which covers all skill levels. Finally, be sure to subscribe for more 3D pen content. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.